The talk of Red Bull or Max Verstappen alone winning every race of the 2024 Formula One season is finished after only 3 races, when the world champion's spectacular failure allowed the returning Carlos Sainz to lead a surprise Ferrari 1-2 at the Australian Grand Prix. It might be a big bummer for Verstappen, but for the casual fan it helps bring back the excitement for the season. But as expected, Max Verstappen was far from happy when he stepped out of his flaming RB20 after only driving a couple of laps, in what could have been a record equaling 10th win in a row for the Dutchman. So, what exactly happened, and how does this change things for Red Bull? Verstappen led the first lap from pole. However, on lap 2, he drove wide into turn 7 and was swiftly overtaken by Sainz in the DRS zone. He claimed that the Red Bull seemed loose, and it became evident why when smoke appeared from its right rear corner shortly after. You might expect a driver who has won 19 of the past 20 Formula One Grand Prix to be devastated when his car caught fire and retired only 4 laps into the Australian Grand Prix. However, Max Verstappen maintained a cool and calculated demeanour in front of the camera in the Albert Park paddock following the race, conducting his media rounds as if it were a typical pre-event Thursday media day. So, what was the problem that ultimately brought the mighty Verstappen-Red Bull combination to a halt and forced him to quit for the first time in 2 years? "I think something already went wrong from the start," Verstappen said. "In the data, we could see that the brake on the right side stopped cooling down. We don't know exactly yet, so something went wrong there. Hence also the moment in turn 3, where I braked and it seemed like one brake was stuck and broke out like that." The Red Bull racing driver lost the race lead soon after. Verstappen claimed that the problem did not arise on the first lap. The very first lap, the brakes are still pretty cold, but you can see that one brake was working normally. You brake and then it cools down again, normally. And that right brake didn't cool down anymore. The Dutchman had the opportunity to pass Sainz again and return to P1, but the same braking issues prevented him from doing so. Then I was behind him. I was able to overtake again. But then, the car broke out again at turn 6. I almost went off there again. That's pretty clear there was something wrong. Of course, I'm disappointed with not being able to finish the race because I think we would have had a good shot at winning, he said. The balance felt quite nice on those laps to the grid and I felt confident and like a good improvement compared to what I felt in the long runs that we did in practice. But yeah, some things you can't control. So, was this a retirement Red Bull brought upon themselves? In other words, was there an error somewhere? Something they might have been able to stop from happening? "We don't know that at the moment. We are all going to check that where it came from," said Verstappen. "Who knows, there is always a chance of technical malfunction. It's still a mechanical sport. Things like that can always happen. It's a bummer though because we did have a chance to win today." When seen in the media pit, there was no suggestion of alarm readable from Verstappen's demeanour. And when asked him why he was so calm, Verstappen said, "Well, it excites me in a way. But of course, I'd like to win. Of course, we had a lot of good races in a row, a lot of good reliability, and I knew that the day would come that you end up having a retirement, and unfortunately, that day was today," he said. "We just had already a very good run of 2 years, so that's already quite impressive. Of course, you never like to see it happen, but it's more important now that we understand why." When it was pointed out to him that this race represented the first time he and his erstwhile championship rival, Lewis Hamilton, whose Mercedes engine failed in Melbourne, had both retired since their collision at the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, Verstappen chuckled and said, "Shit happens, right? Of course I'm disappointed with not being able to finish the race because I think we could have a good shot at winning because the balance felt quite nice on laps to the grid," he went on to say. "I felt confident and a good improvement compared to what I felt in long runs I did in practice. But some things you can't control." He stated that losing the opportunity to tie his own record for the most straight race victories doesn't really matter, and that, as long as we win the championship, that's the most important. Verstappen did not rush through his post-race interview, methodically answering several variants of the same question, on whether we can expect a similar post-Singapore fightback to the dominance he inflicted on the field at Suzuka last year in response to the only non-Red Bull win of 2023, Verstappen said, "No, I know I'm confident with the car. I feel good. Especially yesterday, Saturday. We shouldn't have been on pole, but the laps we did were really good. I just want to have a good weekend again and feel good with the car." He even had time to avoid disclosing any information regarding a probable Red Bull improvement at the Japanese Grand Prix. Well, the colour will be the same. You will see. The implications of Verstappen's retirement are modest after only 3 races into the 2024 season. Verstappen still leads the World Championship by 4 points over Charles Leclerc and 5 over Perez, with Melbourne winner Carlos Sainz 11 points behind due to his absence in Jeddah. Red Bull will properly research the issue before Suzuka, and Verstappen is certain it will be resolved. The RB20's strength will undoubtedly have aided Verstappen's demeanour in comparison to some of his prior DNFs. Though he was overtaken on the track by Sainz before retiring, his Red Bull was already damaged by then. He knows he still has the best car in the competition, one that is more than capable of helping him win his 4th consecutive Drivers' Championship. His title hopes are not jeopardised, as they may have been back in 2022 when he withdrew from 2 of the first 3 races into a season where Ferrari was faster at that time. But it's also a sign of his developing maturity, a proper, successful public test of his trust in the team, and yet another reason to appreciate F1's finest driver of this moment. The implications to the title challenge aren't that huge, but the DNF was a bummer for Red Bull, as it was looking to be at the top of their game once again. And to make matters worse for Red Bull, it seemed that their second driver wasn't able to capitalise on their lead driver retiring from the race. This while Sergio Perez had accomplished Red Bull 1 and 2 finishes in F1 2024's first 2 races. But in Australia, he never looked like stepping up in Verstappen's absence. Although his 6th place starting position was primarily due to a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Nico Hülkenberg in Q1, even in clean air, Perez never had Sainz's pace, though he would have been in the podium mix with Leclerc and the McLarens if he had started where he qualified. Instead, Perez lost a position to George Russell's Mercedes on the opening lap, and then spent the day duelling with it and the Aston Martins, showing only brief glimpses of speed, struggling with tyre wear, and finishing a distant and unimpressive 6th. As a result, he lost 2nd position in the championship to Charles Leclerc, but according to Horner, Perez's floor was damaged, which might explain his dismal speed. We had some floor damage, so he lost quite a lot of downforce at the bottom of the car. That was tough on the tyres, which is very unusual for us. So there's a lot to learn from this race, but it's disappointing to leave here with only 5th place, concluded the Briton. This could also have been a tactic from Red Bull to downplay the underperforming Perez, as the race broadcast never brought up a moment where Perez could have picked up the damage. In the end, it was a bad weekend for the reigning champions, and they leave Melbourne with 97 points in 1st place. But the red prancing horses are very close in 2nd with 93 points, and would have probably been in 1st place hadn't Sainz suffered from appendicitis during the race in Jeddah. But bad luck seems to go both ways, as Verstappen's retirement could have probably been avoided as well. Did you enjoy the race? And does this make you more excited for this season? As Sainz looked mighty fast in the Ferrari today, would it have been enough to beat Verstappen? Probably not, but he wouldn't be far behind him in this form. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.